Closer look at that economic crisis developing in Turkey and the potential impact those problems could have way outside its borders, especially in Europe. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan made clear today he is not backing down in his defiance of the Trump administration's sanctions and tariffs, all aimed at getting him to free jailed Pastor Andrew Brunson. Instead, Erdogan is threatening to retaliate with his own measures.
We will produce every product we are importing from abroad with foreign currency here, and we will be the ones exporting these products. We will impose a boycott on U.S. electronic products. If they have iPhones, there is Samsung on the other side.
Well, joining us in studio is our economy correspondent, Asher Westropp-Evans. But first, let's go to Washington and speak with Michael Werz, Senior Fellow at the American Center for Progress. And Michael, President Erdogan saying that he's going to respond with his own sanctions. The Turkish foreign minister talking about a common front with Russia. Is this the way Turkey is going to be able to solve its economic crisis?
Not at all. This is political grandstanding by President Erdogan because he and his economic advisors know exactly that they are dependent upon imports, not only commodities, but to an even greater degree, energy imports, which are driving their current account deficit to astronomical levels. It's almost 70% of GDP. And he is not going to be able to dig himself out of the hole that he has dug himself into it. Everybody knows that there are three steps that he needs to take. One, he needs to find a way to solve the conflict with the United States. Two, Turkey needs a massive investment program, probably financed by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And third, he needs to raise interest rates, something that he has been reluctant to do.
Asher, the Lira has taken a major hit over all of this, both in and outside Turkey. Seems to have stabilized. Is the worst over or still yet to come?
Look, at this point, it seems unlikely that we've really hit the bottoming out of what we're seeing here. We've seen the Lira fall 30% in just 3 days, so it's bound to stabilize at some point. But more likely, we're seeing here a shelf on the way to a deeper plunge than a true sort of stabilization and return to normalcy. Because the fact of the matter is that the Turkish central bank, while saying it has taken steps to improve liquidity in Turkey's markets, hasn't really taken on the strict orthodoxy program that needs to be put in place here, those that the International Monetary Fund would recommend, such as raising interest rates a drastic amount, again, something Erdogan is very unwilling to do, and cutting government spending, which, again, Turkey just doesn't seem willing to take those necessary steps to really hone in on fixing its economy.
Michael, of course, this is not just an economic issue. It's a geopolitical issue, a diplomatic issue. Looking forward, what is the fallout going to be, first of all, on U.S.-Turkey relationships? And also another player here that's going to be deeply affected, and that's Europe, especially the EU, which Turkey still has, perhaps, or not, aspirations to join.
These are two issues that are increasingly difficult for Turkey because President Erdogan has thoroughly isolated Turkey, not only with regard to his policies vis-a-vis Iran, Syria and Russia, but also, as you mentioned, with regard to the United States and Europe. The relationship with the United States is one that is very, very bad. It is not in a good shape, which partially has to do with the fact that President Trump and President Erdogan are very similar in the way they operate, and they have seemed to have engaged in a very personal fistfight that is unlikely to end very, very quickly. So it's unclear whether there's any solution. With regard to the European Union, it's even more complex because the EU is in a process of reassessing its Turkey policy. The ongoing Turkey-EU accession process that has been stagnant for many years is within a deep discussion. There are a number of very conservative governments, especially in Eastern Europe, but also including Austria and others, that want to terminate this process. So Erdogan is in a very complicated foreign policy environment, and he doesn't seem to fully appreciate that it is not in Turkey's national interest to further exacerbate the tensions that are already present.
Asher, we have been looking at, you have been in the studio several times, whether it's about China or about Mexico or otherwise, at sort of unlikely alliances forming because of face-offs that these countries are having with President Trump. Now that we see Russia and Turkey there aligned, making those statements, a new united front?
Absolutely. I mean, we saw the Turkish foreign minister and the Russian foreign minister meet today in Ankara to discuss how their countries are going to join a combined effort to deal with the economic crisis being faced by both countries and arguably retaliating to U.S. sort of actions. And we can take a listen here to what Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, had to say today.
Я уверен, что I think that such a blatant overuse of the dollar's role as the global reserve currency will weaken it. It will be sinking, and more countries, even those which are not affected by the U.S. sanctions, will move away from the dollar just to be on the safe side and count on more reliable partners.
And this as well was doubled down on by the Turkish finance minister, who said today that the dollar has really lost its credibility and is being used by the US to politically punish nations. And this is really the concern that a lot of nations are having around the world, that as the US sort of throws its weight around in the escalating global trade war, that it will use the dollar, this currency of global trade, which has been stable as the currency of global trade, as a mechanism to keep other players in or out of markets as they see fit, which is what we're seeing with a number of the sanctions and tariff impositions that the US is imposing, such as what they've put back on Iran and other nations, which will really limit their capacity to access a lot of foreign markets. So current countries are now turning to the possibility of not using the dollar in its global trade.
Michael, I want to ask you sort of a politically bigger picture. What do you think about that issue? I mean, President Trump keeps saying that, well, these sanctions are going to push all of these countries back to the table. We're going to get a better deal out of it. But is there a risk that these countries just go somewhere else?
No, that is not really an option for Turkey, even though it is not a reasonable position for the U.S. president to take, because he has been using tariffs and sanctions against friends and foes, which seems to be his preferred mode of operation. But for Turkey, the options are limited. There's nothing to say against a solid economic relationship between Turkey and Russia. But the fact that President Erdogan and his AKP allies seem to be willing to move Turkey even further away from the Western alliance and also its military unity within NATO is something that is truly worrying. At the end of the day, this will not be an option for Turkey, because Turkey is not only culturally and historically tied into the European environment, but also economically. The Turkish debt is held by a number of European banks. The only assets that can be mobilized to support Turkish economy and get Turkey out of the hole that it has dug itself into are in the West. And so I think the options are limited, but it's going to be interesting to see whether President Erdogan really will commit to a more humble position, because he will lose face, that is for certain.